3 days ago, something happened at the World Economic Forum in Davos that geopolitical analysts are calling the most significant moment in U.S.-allied relations since the end of the Cold War. Not a treaty, not a war, a statement. When President Trump publicly told Canada's Prime Minister that Canada lives because of the United States, remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements, he fundamentally changed the framework of American power. And here's what most Americans missed while watching the news cycle move on. This wasn't diplomatic clumsiness. This was deliberate strategy, a public redefinition of alliance from partnership to patronage. The day before, Mark Carney had given a speech that received a standing ovation, warning that the rules-based international order is dead, that great powers are now using economic integration as weapons, tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion. Trump's response confirmed everything Carney said, on camera, at the most elite gathering of Western power, in front of every ally America has. And according to analysts in Beijing, Brussels, and New Delhi, this is the gift China's been waiting decades to receive. Because while America builds a fortress of energy dominance, economic growth, and a $1 trillion missile defense shield, we're accidentally handing China something more valuable: the narrative that America has no partners, only servants. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what happened this week in Davos, what it means for America's global position, and why this could be the moment historians point to when they ask, how did we lose the 21st century? Let me show you exactly what happened, using only verified statements from this week. Canada's Prime Minister took the stage at Davos and delivered what's being called the most important speech by a Western leader in years. We are in a rupture of the world order, the end of a nice story, and the beginning of a brutal reality where geopolitics among the great powers is not subject to any constraints. Carney didn't mention Trump by name, but everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons, tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, and supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. He then quoted the ancient Greek historian Thucydides: "The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must." Middle powers must act together, because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. The audience, European leaders, Asian diplomats, global CEOs, rose to their feet. The applause lasted nearly a minute. Carney was speaking for every American ally who's been threatened with tariffs, pressured on defense spending, and told their security is conditional. He was saying out loud what they've been thinking privately. The old alliance system is dead. The next day, Trump took the same stage, and he didn't just disagree with Carney. He made an example of him. Here are Trump's exact words: "I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. They should be grateful to us, Canada. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements." He then added, "Canada gets a lot of freebies from us." Let me be clear about what just happened. The President of the United States at the world's most prominent economic forum publicly told America's closest ally, a country we share the world's longest undefended border with, our second largest trading partner, a fellow NATO member, that their continued existence is a gift from us. Not that we have mutual interests, not that we're strategic partners, that they exist because we allow it. This is the language of suzerain and vassal, of patron and client, of empire and dependency. And it was broadcast live to every foreign ministry, intelligence agency, and strategic planning office on Earth. 2 days later, Trump revoked Carney's invitation to the Board of Peace, his newly announced initiative to oversee Gaza reconstruction. The message was unmistakable. Criticize American policy, lose access to American platforms. Carney had already left Davos. He flew back to Quebec City and gave a national address. Canada and the United States have built a remarkable partnership in the economy, in security, and in rich cultural exchange. But Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. We are masters in our home. This is our own country. It's our future. The choice is up to us. That's what happened this week. Now let me show you why it matters. Now let me show you why analysts in Beijing are calling this China's best week in a decade. For 20 years, China has been trying to convince the developing world of one narrative, that American alliances are actually protection rackets, that the rules-based order is just American dominance with better branding, that partnerships with Washington always end in submission. For 20 years, most countries didn't fully believe it. Then Trump confirmed it, at Davos, on camera, to America's closest neighbor. Let me read you what Chinese state media said within hours of Trump's statement. The mask has finally fallen. The United States does not have allies. It has vassals. Prime Minister Carney spoke truth and was punished for it. That's not Chinese propaganda creating a narrative. That's Chinese propaganda amplifying America's own words. Brazil's chief advisor to President Lula, Celso Amorim, gave an interview 2 days after Trump's Davos speech. He was asked about Trump's tariff threats against BRICS nations. These threats are reinforcing our relations with BRICS because we want diversified relations and not depend on any one country. That's a direct quote. Not from an adversary, from Latin America's largest economy. India's Ministry of External Affairs issued a statement emphasizing strategic autonomy and multi-alignment. African Union officials circulated Carney's speech transcript with the subject line, "This is what we've been saying." The Belt and Road acceleration. Within 48 hours of the Davos exchange, China announced $15 billion in new infrastructure loans to Southeast Asia. A strategic partnership for the Global South initiative. Expansion of BRICS Plus to include 13 additional observer nations. Beijing's pitch is simple. We offer development without political strings. We respect sovereignty. We don't demand you choose between us and others. Whether that's true in practice is debatable. But perception matters more than reality in geopolitics. And the perception this week was crystal clear. America treats partners like servants. China offers an alternative. According to the International Monetary Fund, developing and emerging economies will contribute approximately 60% of global GDP growth between 2024 to 2028. China's Belt and Road initiative now includes roughly 150 countries, representing 75% of the world's population and over half of global GDP. These aren't peripheral markets. This is where the future is being built, and these nations watched very carefully what happened in Davos this week. They saw a Canadian Prime Minister, educated at Harvard and Oxford, former governor of the Bank of Canada and Bank of England, leading a G7 nation, get publicly humiliated for suggesting that alliances should be partnerships, not patronage. They saw him receive a standing ovation from European leaders. They saw him get punished for it 2 days later, and they updated their strategic assessments accordingly. When the Global South builds infrastructure, they choose whose technology to buy, whose technical standards to adopt, whose currency to use for trade, whose satellites to launch communications on, whose payment systems to integrate. Those choices compound over decades. If China provides the ports, the power plants, the 5G networks, the digital payment rails, they own the infrastructure of the 21st century economy. America can have the most powerful military, the most advanced AI, the largest GDP. But if 75% of the world's population trades in systems that exclude dollars, that bypass American financial networks, that operate under Chinese technical standards, then American power becomes regional, not global. This is what Beijing sees, an America building an impregnable fortress while accidentally surrendering influence over everyone outside the walls. The question isn't whether the fortress is strong. The question is whether it matters if you're isolated inside it. Now let's talk about Europe, because what happened in Davos puts European leaders in an impossible bind. The president of the European Commission spoke at Davos the day after Trump's statement. Her speech was carefully worded, but the message was clear. She called this Europe's Nixon moment, referring to 1971 when President Nixon abandoned the gold standard without consulting allies, forcing Europe to completely rethink its economic assumptions. Translation: the big brother will no longer come to the rescue. She announced the Rewrote plan, 800 billion euros mobilized for defense by 2030. That sounds massive until you do the math. 800 billion euros divided by 27 EU member states over 5 years equals approximately 30 billion euros per country per year. The US defense budget is over $850 billion annually for one country. Europe cannot replace American military power with this funding. Not even close. They cannot defend themselves without American military technology. Right now, 80% of European military procurement comes from the United States. F-35 fighters, reconnaissance systems, ballistic missile defense, logistics networks, and of course, the nuclear umbrella, American nuclear weapons protecting European territory. The US maintains approximately 100,000 troops in Europe. These aren't charity deployments, they're strategic positioning for American interests. But the relationship has fundamentally changed from mutual obligation to conditional transaction. After Trump's statement about Canada, multiple European leaders had emergency consultations. According to sources at Davos, French President Macron, German Chancellor Merz, and Polish PM Tusk met privately with Carney after his speech. The conversation reportedly focused on one question: if Canada can be treated this way, what about us? NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte gave a carefully worded statement. Canada is back as a pivotal NATO participant and global leader. That's diplomatic language for, we support Carney's position without directly contradicting Trump. Carl Bildt, former Prime Minister of Sweden, was less diplomatic. He posted on X, very important and very well-put remarks by Canadian PM Mark Carney. Middle powers must indeed stand together. Within days of the Davos exchange, European Commission announced trade negotiations with India, targeting completion by June 2026. France initiated direct energy deals, bypassing US LNG suppliers. Germany accelerated partnerships with Japanese defense manufacturers. Nordic countries increased cooperation with Canada on Arctic security. This is called de-risking, not abandoning the American alliance, but preparing for the possibility it becomes unreliable. Here's the cruel irony. Europe already paid an enormous price to decouple from Russian energy after Ukraine. They shut down Nord Stream. They restructured their entire energy economy. They accepted higher costs, deindustrialization in some sectors, to align with American interests. That sacrifice made them more dependent on American LNG. And now that dependency is being weaponized. Remember, Trump threatened 10% tariffs on 8 European countries just 2 weeks ago. France, Germany, UK, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Netherlands, escalating to 25%, ostensibly related to Greenland and Arctic access. But the message was clear. Economic coercion works on allies too. The tariffs were suspended after negotiations, but the threat remains. Europe is now trying to simultaneously increase defense spending to reduce US dependency, 800 billion euros over 5 years, maintain NATO alliance for nuclear deterrence, no alternative exists, diversify energy to avoid single-source vulnerability, post-Russia, now post-US, navigate Chinese economic ties without full dependence, very difficult, Respond to U.S. tariff threats while maintaining trade. Constant negotiation. It's an impossible optimization problem, and every European leader knows it. Mark Carney gave them something they desperately needed: permission to say out loud what they've been thinking privately. The old order is dead. Stop pretending it's coming back. Build alternatives while you still can. Now we need to talk about what Trump was actually defending in Davos: the Golden Dome. Because this is the strategic logic behind the fortress approach. Announced in May 2025, the Golden Dome is a multi-layer missile defense system designed to make the United States nearly invulnerable to nuclear attack. Here are the actual numbers. Estimated cost: $161 billion to $542 billion over 20 years. Congressional Budget Office. Some independent analysts estimate over $1 trillion when including satellite constellations. Congress has already allocated $24.4 billion as initial funding. Over 2,000 companies awarded contracts under SHIELD, Scalable Homeland Innovative Enterprise Layered Defense. Ceiling for SHIELD program: $151 billion over the next decade. SpaceX is positioned to receive approximately $2 billion for satellite components. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, L3Harris, all major contractors. The system would include space-based sensors and interceptors, ground-based missile defense, Arctic installations for boost phase interception, integration with existing systems, THAAD, Patriot, Aegis. The goal: intercept ICBMs, hypersonic missiles, even cruise missiles, before they reach the continental United States. This is why Trump wants Greenland. Intercontinental ballistic missiles from Russia and China take the shortest path to U.S. targets: over the Arctic, over Greenland. To intercept missiles during boost phase, the first minutes after launch when they're most vulnerable, you need sensors and interceptors positioned directly under the flight path. That means Greenland. Trump stated at Davos, "Control of Greenland is vital for the Golden Dome that we are building." Within 2 days, he announced a framework agreement with NATO on Arctic security and Greenland access. Denmark's Prime Minister, after initially opposing U.S. control, agreed to negotiations on expanded American military presence. Trump suspended threatened tariffs on European nations after this agreement. If the Golden Dome works, even partially, it fundamentally changes nuclear deterrence. For 80 years, mutually assured destruction kept the peace. Nobody launches first because everyone dies. But if America achieves 80 to 90% interception capability, the equation changes. Russia's entire great power status rests on its nuclear arsenal. If that becomes obsolete against the American homeland, Moscow faces an existential crisis. China has been rapidly modernizing its nuclear forces. The Pentagon estimates Chinese warheads increased from approximately 200 in 2020 to over 500 in 2024, with projections of 1,000 plus by 2030. The Golden Dome will accelerate this arms race. Here's the problem: it's cheaper to build more missiles than to shoot them down. A defense system costing $1 trillion can potentially be overwhelmed by $100 billion worth of additional missiles. The offense always has the cost advantage. So what happens? Russia builds more. China builds more. Iran, North Korea. Everyone builds more. The world becomes more armed, not less. Defense analysts call this the security dilemma. When one side believes it's becoming invulnerable, it may act more aggressively. When the other side believes its deterrent is being neutralized, it may strike preemptively. The shield creates danger even as it provides protection. Now here's why the Canada lives because of the United States comment matters strategically. Canada wants to participate in Golden Dome. They've expressed willingness. Canadian territory is crucial for Arctic coverage. But Trump told Canada, "You should be grateful we're even protecting you. This is transactional security. Pay up, submit, or we withdraw the umbrella. Canada's ambassador to the UN, Bob Rae, responded, "This sounds like a protection racket. Threats to sovereign integrity are prohibited under the UN Charter." That's a Canadian diplomat publicly comparing American security guarantees to organized crime. That's how far the relationship has deteriorated in 1 week. There's one more piece of this strategy that's being overlooked: energy. Because while everyone focuses on missiles and trade wars, there's a quieter revolution that could determine who wins the AI race, and therefore the 21st century. Meta is building a 5-gigawatt AI data center in Louisiana. That's more power consumption than some entire countries. Microsoft signed a 20-year contract to reactivate 3 Mile Island nuclear plant, specifically to power AI infrastructure. Amazon is investing $20 billion in Pennsylvania data centers adjacent to nuclear facilities. Google is projected to consume more electricity for AI by 2027 than Ireland or Portugal use annually. U.S. natural gas production, 108 billion cubic feet per day, equals Russia, Iran, China combined. U.S. oil production, 24.2 million barrels per day, exceeds Saudi Arabia and Russia combined. Nuclear fleet, 94 operational reactors generating approximately 20% of U.S. electricity. Plus, streamlined permitting, relaxed environmental reviews, aggressive expansion plans. The administration's bet is simple. AI supremacy requires energy supremacy. The country with unlimited cheap electricity will attract the data centers, the tech companies, the innovation. Meanwhile, Germany shut down its nuclear plants. France's fleet is aging, the continent committed to wind and solar, great for climate, terrible for powering AI that needs electricity 24/7. European electricity prices have spiked. Industrial manufacturers are relocating to cheaper energy markets. China is building nuclear reactors faster than anyone in history, 31 under construction as of 2024. They're also dominating solar panel production, 95% of European imports, battery technology, and EV supply chains. So here's the strategic trade-off. America wins the AI race through fossil fuels and nuclear. Europe commits to climate action but needs Chinese green tech. China becomes indispensable for the green transition while also building coal plants. Everyone's making trade-offs. The question is, whose trade-offs create the most leverage? He called Europe's Green Deal a green scam. He mocked wind turbines. He said America can approve nuclear plants in 3 weeks, which is administratively impossible, but signals intent. The message? Deregulation as competitive advantage, and the early data shows it's working. Tech companies are concentrating AI infrastructure in the U.S. where power is abundant and cheap. But there's a cost. The U.S. has effectively abandoned climate leadership, withdrawal from Paris Agreement, rollback of emissions regulations, acceleration of fossil fuel development. This creates a vacuum. And China is filling it. Beijing is offering Europe exactly what it needs for the green transition: solar panels, batteries, grid storage, EVs. European dependence on Russian energy is being replaced by European dependence on Chinese green tech. The irony is almost poetic. All right, let's bring this home. What does the Davos exchange mean for America's position and for you personally? The strategic calculation. The Trump administration is pursuing a coherent grand strategy. 1. Energy dominance, verified, record production. 2. Economic acceleration through deregulation, verified, 270,000 federal positions eliminated. 3. Military invulnerability through Golden Dome, verified, $24.4 billion allocated. 4. Transactional alliances, verified, Davos statements confirm. On paper, this creates unprecedented American power. Energy independence, economic growth, nuclear shield, the ability to dictate terms. The trade-off: But grand strategies have second and third order effects. This week in Davos revealed the costs. Diplomatic isolation, lowest U.S. global favorability in modern polling, alliance of democracies. European strategic autonomy accelerating. BRICS expanding. Economic fragmentation, allies actively building alternatives to U.S.-dependent systems, Belt and Road reaching 150 countries, de-dollarization attempts multiplying. Arms race acceleration, Russia and China ramping up nuclear programs in response to Golden Dome. Global military spending at record levels. Narrative defeat, China's message, America has no partners, only servants, confirmed by America's own president. Beijing didn't have to create the narrative. We handed it to them. What this means for you. If you work in defense/aerospace, major opportunity, massive procurement pipeline. Defense stocks likely to perform well. If you work in export-dependent industries, headwinds. As allies diversify away from U.S. markets, American exports face long-term pressure. Agriculture, manufacturing, tech services, all exposed. If you're in tech/AI, complicated. Energy advantage creates opportunity domestically. But if China sets standards for 75% of global markets, you might dominate America and lose the world. If you're investing for retirement, fragmentation matters. Global integration drove growth for decades. When trade becomes weaponized and blocks form, efficiency decreases, growth slows. If you care about national security, we're safer from missiles, potentially. More vulnerable to cyber warfare, certainly. More exposed to coalition building against us, already happening. The dollar question. The U.S. has enjoyed exorbitant privilege since Bretton Woods. We print our own currency and the world accepts it for trade. This allows us to run deficits other countries cannot, to finance consumption with foreign savings, to maintain military presence globally. If that privilege erodes, not quickly but gradually over 10 to 20 years, interest rates rise, borrowing costs increase, government debt becomes harder to service. It doesn't happen overnight. But the trajectory matters more than the moment. The historical pattern. Every fortress empire discovered that walls trap those inside as surely as they keep enemies out. Rome built the strongest walls in the ancient world, collapsed from internal division and external coalition. Britain had the largest empire in history, lost it when the cost of maintenance exceeded the benefit of control. The Soviet Union built an ideological fortress, imploded when the world stopped caring about their system. America's fortress is different in technology, but not in essence. Energy, economy, military, unmatched in raw power. But power without influence is just strength in isolation. Can we win alone? That's the question Davos 2026 raised. Can economic and military dominance substitute for diplomatic partnerships? Can strength replace influence? Can the fortress model work in the 21st century? We're about to find out, because the strategy is being executed right now in real time, with consequences that will unfold over decades. The fortress is rising. What we build next to it, bridges or barricades, will determine what kind of world your children inherit. 3 days ago in Davos, 2 speeches defined the future of global power. Mark Carney told the truth about the world as it is. The rules-based order is dead. Great powers use economic integration as weapons. Middle powers must band together or end up on the menu. Received a standing ovation. Donald Trump responded by confirming everything Carney said. Canada lives because we allow it. They should be grateful. Security is a service we provide, not a mutual obligation. China amplified that message to 150 countries. This wasn't a gaffe. This wasn't off the cuff. This was deliberate strategy, a public redefinition of American power from partnership to patronage. The fortress is real. $24.4 billion allocated for Golden Dome, 108 billion cubic feet of gas per day. Record GDP growth 2,000+ companies building the defenses. This isn't speculation, it's procurement. But so is everything outside the fortress. Belt and Road expanding to 150 countries. European strategic autonomy accelerate. BRICS adding members. De-Dollarization attempts multiplying. Both realities are happening simultaneously. America is getting stronger and more isolated. The question isn't whether we can build the fortress. Clearly, we can. The question is whether we should and what we're willing to lose in the process. Can we win the 21st century alone? Or do we need the partnerships we're burning? History suggests fortress empires don't end well. But maybe this time is different. Maybe technology has changed the equation. We're about to find out. Because what happened in Davos this week wasn't just words. It was a choice. And that choice is being executed right now, with real money, real alliances, and real consequences. The fortress is rising. The world is watching. And the verdict is still out on whether this ends in triumph or isolation. Thanks for watching. If this analysis was valuable, share it, because understanding what just happened in Davos matters more than most people realize. The 21st century is being decided right now, and most Americans have no idea it's even happening.